On the morning of February 22nd, 2024, Laken Riley laced up her running shoes. She sent her mother a text. She stepped out into a grey Georgia morning and ran toward the trail she visited almost every day. A wooded path near the University of Georgia campus she knew by heart. She never came back. She was found hours later in the woods, beaten with a rock so many times her skull was disfigured. Her clothing had been pulled up. She had fought back. The evidence of that fight, her DNA under the attacker's fingernails, his DNA on her body, told the story of a 22-year-old nursing student who refused to be a victim without a fight, and she lost anyway. Laken Riley was 22 years old. She was a nursing student at Augusta University's Athens campus. She was a daughter, a sister, a best friend. She ran that trail hundreds of times. That morning was supposed to be just another run. This is True Crime Explainer, where we follow the evidence and give victims back their story. If this is your first time here, subscribe right now. Because what I'm about to show you about the evidence that caught a killer, the defense that tried to blame his own brother, and the families who stood in that courtroom and looked him in the eye, is the story nobody told completely. Laken Hope Riley grew up in Georgia. She was studying nursing, not because it was convenient or because it paid well, but because that was who she was. Her mother, Allison Phillips, described her in one sentence that has stayed with everyone who heard it. She said Laken was smart, hard-working, kind, thoughtful, and most importantly, she was a child of God. Sister Lauren said Laken was her biggest role model, that she looked up to her in every way. That Laken brought the joy that I needed into my life and never failed to make me laugh. Her roommate Connolly Huth used to run with her. After Laken's death, she told the court she had lost the joy of what running was before Laken was taken from us. She said she lives with excruciating guilt every day that she was not beside her on that trail. On the morning of February 22nd, Laken left her apartment and began her regular morning run. Surveillance cameras captured her on the trail near the intramural fields at 9:08 a.m. That footage was the last visual record of her alive. Her roommates spent the afternoon trying to reach her. They called, they texted. They filed a missing persons report when she didn't come back. At 9:28 p.m., 12 hours after she was last seen, Laken Riley's body was found in a wooded area near the trail. The medical examiner determined she had been struck in the head with a rock multiple times, so many times that her skull was disfigured. She had been asphyxiated. Her clothing had been pulled up, indicating an attempted sexual assault. She had been on that trail for approximately 12 hours before she was found. She was 22 years old. Jose Antonio Ibarra was 26 years old. He was a Venezuelan national who had entered the United States illegally in El Paso, Texas in 2022. He had been allowed to remain in the country while his immigration case worked through the system. He lived with his brothers in an apartment near the University of Georgia campus, near the same trail where Laken Riley ran every morning. Here is how investigators found him. And the precision of this evidence is important, because the defense would later spend 4 days trying to unpick every single strand of it. Laken Riley fought hard. Under her fingernails, investigators found DNA. It matched Jose Ibarra. On her body, investigators found more of his DNA. He had scratches on his body consistent with defensive wounds. Cameras near the trail captured an unknown person in a black Adidas hat. Later the same day, that hat was used to stuff a jacket with Laken Riley's DNA on it, into a dumpster near the apartment complex where Ibarra lived. The next day, police spotted Ibarra's brother wearing that exact hat. That led them to Ibarra. Investigators found photographs on Ibarra's own phone, selfies he had taken of himself in the hours surrounding the murder. In those photos, he was wearing clothing that matched what was captured on surveillance cameras near the scene. FBI Special Agent James Burney testified that electronic location data placed Laken Riley and Jose Ibarra in the same wooded area at the same time on the morning of February 22nd. Police woke Ibarra up the following morning at his apartment. Body camera footage recorded the encounter. He was arrested and booked without bond. The police work in this case, from the moment Laken Riley was reported missing to the arrest of Jose Ibarra, took less than 24 hours. Less than 24 hours, the evidence chain was precise, layered, and devastating. DNA, digital location data, surveillance footage, his own selfies, his own DNA on her body, her DNA on his jacket, and his brother the next morning wearing the hat seen at the dumpster. That is not a case built on one thread. That is a case built on a rope. And the defense was going to have to cut through every single strand. Now, I need you to stay with me for the next section. Because what the defense did in that courtroom, the argument they mounted, the person they pointed at, is the most infuriating part of this entire case. They didn't argue Ibarra was innocent, they argued someone else did it. And the person they pointed at was Ibarra's own brother, Jose Ibarra's defense attorney was Caitlin Beck. She is a public defender. She did not choose this client, she was assigned him. That matters. What she did was her legal obligation, and she did it aggressively. The defense's theory was simple. It was not Jose Ibarra who killed Laken Riley. It was his brother, Diego Ibarra. Here is the basis for that theory. Diego Ibarra worked a shift at the University of Georgia's dining hall on the day of the murder. He was in the area. He had access to the same apartment as Jose, the same clothing, the same spaces. Defense attorney Beck argued that Jose and Diego shared clothing and a bed, which, she said, could explain the DNA cross-contamination. She told the judge, "Evidence that is subject to more than one interpretation is not proof beyond reasonable doubt. I would remind Your Honour that even if you think the alternative theories of the evidence are less likely, but they present any reasonable doubt, you would still be required to find Mr. Ibarra not guilty. That is a legally correct statement. Reasonable doubt is the standard, and a defense attorney's job is to find it or manufacture the appearance of it." But here is what the prosecution had to say about that theory. Prosecutor Sheila Ross stood before the judge and said, "When Laken Riley refused to be his rape victim, he bashed her skull in with a rock repeatedly." She pointed to Riley's DNA under Ibarra's fingernails, not Diego's. She pointed to Ibarra's selfies on Ibarra's phone showing Ibarra in the clothes captured on the cameras. She pointed to the electronic location data placing Ibarra, not Diego, in the woods at the time of the murder. And she pointed to the fact that neither Jose Ibarra nor Diego Ibarra nor their third brother took the stand. Not one of them testified. The brother they were blaming sat in that courtroom for 4 days and said nothing. Before I get to what Judge Haggard said when he handed down that verdict, I want to take 30 seconds. Because the number of messages I get every week asking how I research cases like this, how I structure them to keep people watching, and how I find the angles the headlines miss has been extraordinary. I put everything this channel does into a course. It is called Read the Crime, a true crime fan's guide to criminal psychology, forensic evidence, and how investigators really solve cases. It covers criminal profiling, how DNA evidence actually works in a courtroom, how investigators build a chain of evidence, how defense attorneys find reasonable doubt, and how to read any true crime case the way a trained investigator does. If you watched this video and you wanted to go even deeper, the link is in the description. It was built for this audience specifically. Now, back to Athens, Georgia. Because what that judge said on November 20th, 2024, is something Laken Riley's family had waited 9 months to hear. Before I get to the verdict and the sentencing, I want to talk about a decision that the defense made before the trial even began. A decision that almost never happens in a murder case. Jose Ibarra waived his right to a jury trial. He asked for a bench trial, meaning one person, Judge H. Patrick Haggard, would hear the evidence and decide his fate. No 12 jurors, no deliberations, no hung jury. One judge. Why would a defense team do that? Legal analysts offered a direct answer. In a case this politically charged, a case that had been used in presidential campaign speeches, that had been name-checked in the State of the Union address, that had become a national flashpoint in the immigration debate, the defense may have calculated that a jury of everyday Georgians, saturated with media coverage, carried more risk than a single experienced judge. A judge applies the law precisely. A judge is trained to set aside emotion. A judge who finds reasonable doubt is required to acquit regardless of how the public feels about the case. It was a calculated legal move, and it failed. Judge Haggard took a 20-minute break after closing arguments. He came back into that courtroom. He looked at the evidence. He looked at the defense's alternate theory, and he found Jose Ibarra guilty on every single count he faced: malice murder, 3 counts of felony murder, kidnapping with bodily injury, aggravated assault with intent to rape, aggravated battery, false imprisonment, peeping Tom, tampering with evidence, 10 counts. 10 guilty verdicts. Sobbing filled that courtroom as each one was read. And then Laken Riley's family got to speak. Before Judge Haggard sentenced Jose Ibarra, Laken Riley's parents, sister, stepfather, roommates and friends all stood up, one by one, and they looked at the man who killed her. Her mother, Alison Phillips, stood at that podium and said, "Jose Ibarra took no pity on my scared, panicked and struggling child. There is no end to the pain, suffering and loss that we have experienced or will continue to endure. This monster took away our chances to see Laken graduate from nursing school. He took away our ability to meet our future son-in-law. He destroyed our chances of meeting our grandchildren." And then she said, her voice breaking, "He took my best friend." Sister Lauren said, "I looked up to her in every way. She brought the joy that I needed into my life and never failed to make me laugh." Her roommate Lily Steiner said, Laken left a colossal legacy to everyone she touched, and that is something Jose Ibarra will never be able to take away. Her roommate Sofia Magana called her chosen family and fearless other half, and said her heart was full of grief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of loss. Her roommate Connolly Huth, who used to run with her, said she has lost the joy of what running was before Laken was taken from us. She said she prays it never happens to anyone else, and then she said something that hit the courtroom like a stone. Live with excruciating guilt every day that I was not accompanying Laken on this run, and that it was her and not me. Jose Ibarra sat through all of it looking mostly at the floor. He had shown little emotion throughout the trial. He showed little emotion as each statement was read. Judge Haggard sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will never leave that prison. Laken Riley sent her mother a text on the morning of February 22, 2024. That text, the last message her mother received from her daughter, was one of the final pieces of digital evidence prosecutors used to establish the timeline of what happened on that trail. Her final text. Used in a murder trial, she was 22 years old. She was going to be a nurse. She was her mother's best friend, her sister's biggest role model, her roommate's fearless other half. She ran that trail because she loved running, because it was safe, because it was hers. It was not safe. And the system that was supposed to make it safe, the immigration process that allowed Jose Ibarra to remain in the country, the oversight that should have flagged his presence near a university campus, the institutions that existed and failed to intersect in time to stop what happened on February 22nd. That system is still being examined. Legislation was passed in Georgia in the wake of her death. Whether it is enough is a question her family is still asking. What is no longer a question is who killed her. What is no longer a question is what happened on that trail. And what is no longer a question is where Jose Ibarra will spend the rest of his life. He is in prison. He will die there, but Laken Riley should be alive. She should be about to graduate nursing school. She should be planning her future. She should be texting her mother back. Say her name in the comments. Tell me which part of this case hit you hardest. Because this community always has the most important things to say, and I read every single one. Subscribe if you haven't. The next case I'm covering kept me awake the night I finished researching it. Turn on notifications. I'll see you there. Laken Hope Riley, 22 years old. Augusta University nursing student. Athens, Georgia. Her name deserves to be remembered.